Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Williams and I'm here to help you figure out how to define the problem in your engineering notebook. So I have actually edited a game manual for you for the game Rise Above to help walk you through and help you define the problem. So there's three things that we're going to need to do. We're going to need to write an overview of how you play the game, talk about the game field elements, talk about how to score, and then list the criteria and constraints. So let's get started. I'm going to scroll through this, and you've got a link to this in the week 2 lesson that your coaches gave you. The game manual starts with a table of contents, so you can read through. It's a pretty long game manual, but you can read through it on your own if you want to read every detail. But I've gone through and highlighted some parts of the game manual to help you out. So you can see in section 1 where it talks about the game and the game description. This is where you will get the information for your game overview. So you will see I've highlighted a few parts of these sentences. I'd like you to reword those highlighted areas into your own sentence or two that just gives a big overview of how you play the game. So obviously you can see that 2 robots will work together to score as many points as possible. And you can see here by scoring and stacking risers and goals, completing rows, and completing stacks. So we'll talk more about what that means in a moment, but that is your game overview. I'm going to scroll through a little bit and you will see that this is actually the setup of how the game will look when you start the game. We're going to talk more about this as well, but there are 2 starting positions, so the robots will start in one or the other. You can ask your alliance partner which one they want to start in, and you want to practice from both starting positions. You will see that one driver is going to be in a driver station on this left side of the game field, and the other drivers, since there are 2 drivers, will be on the other side. So this is a little different in the past because the field is bigger. We now have drivers on either side of the game field. So you want to practice driving on both sides to get ready for the tournament. Okay, so we're going to run through this a little bit more. The first thing that you will see that I highlighted about how to score, let's scroll down a little more, sorry, it's going a little fast, is right here. So we're going to talk about the game field elements. So you can see there's a definition of what a riser is, and it also has dimensions, which is important to include in your defining the problem because you're going to build a robot that needs to pick up that riser, so you definitely want to know the dimensions. So you can also draw or cut a picture out of this riser or take a picture of a riser and paste it into your notebook. And then that will help to describe it. But you can also use that definition right there. So you want to describe the game field elements, and in this case, we're really only dealing with risers in this game. Now the next thing you'll see is how you score. So this is, we'll talk a little bit about scoring in rows. You can see that it's like tic-tac-toe. You can score either diagonally in a row, or you can put in the risers in the goals that go horizontally in a row or vertically in a row. So you'll have to, put a riser in each goal to complete that row. You will see these point values are on page 10, which we will also need to include. I'm actually going to jump forward to that right now. And page 10, you will see if you put a riser in a goal, it's worth 1 point. If you have a stacked riser, that means you put a riser on top of another riser, then it's also worth 1 point. If you have a completed row, horizontal, diagonal, or vertical, it's worth 3 points. And then if you complete a stack, here's the big point value right here, 30 points. So if you want to really do well in this game, you're going to need to build a robot that can actually stack 3 risers high to get those 30 points. All right, so let's return to some criteria and constraints that we passed by already. Okay, so criteria, when you list criteria in your defining the problem in your notebook, you can just bullet point them, but criteria is what needs to be done to play the game successfully. A constraint is a limitation. So you can't have more than this, or you have to do this. You can't start anywhere. You've got to start in the starting position. So let's talk about this first criteria that you'll list in your notebook. you must put a goal, a riser in the goal. And when it's in that goal, it needs to actually touch the entire floor. So you can see in this example, the riser cannot be over here on the blue edge. That would not be considered a base riser or a scored goal. So that's criteria. You must score all the way within the goal zone. You will see a stacked riser, also criteria, that all risers must be upright. So if you have one that's laying over horizontally, then that's not going to count as a completed stack. So this completed stack is worth 30 points. Let's go ahead and move on. Okay, here's our first constraint, which is a limitation. You must start in the starting position. So you will see that there's 2 designated starting positions, but you must actually start your robot there. That is a constraint. It's a limitation. You can't just start anywhere. Let me scroll down a little bit more. Here is, we already put this in our scoring section. So we'll talk about these criteria. So you must place safely. You must also play and conduct yourselves in a respectful and positive manner. So these are actually in the rules of the game manual, and you could be disqualified if we see that you're doing anything that's dangerous or disrespectful. So this would be considered criteria. You must do this to play the game successfully. Let's see what we have next. Here's a constraint. Actually, there's 3 constraints. So this is talking about the starting size of your robot. So when you start before a match, and this is actually when you get your robot inspected as well, that it must touch the floor in the starting position area, and it must fit within 11 by 19 inches box. So you may only build a robot that can be as long as 19 inches and as wide as 11 inches. It also can be no taller than 15 inches from the floor. So when it's in this starting position, it has a starting size, and this is your constraint. It can be no bigger than 11 by 19 by 15 inches tall. Now, I do suggest you make your robots a little smaller than that, so you don't get disqualified because you're just a little bit over. So maybe make a robot that's 10 by 18 by 14, and you won't have to worry about not passing inspection. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on. You will see that here's another criteria. This, in order to play the game successfully, you must switch the controllers midway through the match. So it's a 1-minute match. I guess that could be a constraint. You have 1 minute to play. But you must switch your controller at about the 30-second mark. You can do it anywhere between 25 and 35 seconds, but that is criteria. You must switch the controller. You also must stay in your driver station, and I pointed that out in the beginning of this video. So you cannot just walk around the field. You have to stay while you're driving and during the entire match in that designated driver station area. You'll notice there's probably a lot more criteria and constraints that I'm missing. I just really want you to put the main ones in that I've highlighted. So here's another criteria. You may not intentionally detach parts or leave things on the field. Now, sometimes this happens because your robot breaks, and that's okay. But you cannot intentionally eject a part to get in someone's way or to knock something over. So that would be a disqualification. That's criteria. You must not have intentionally detached parts. Okay, let's see. Do I have any more? Okay, here we go. You must, as a criteria, you must pass a full inspection before being able to participate. So that is criteria before you can play. Let's see, sorry, I'm scrolling kind of fast here. Here we go, constraint. You may only use VEX IQ components. So you can't just use any parts you want on your robot. They have to come from your VEX IQ kit. That's a limitation. Here's another limitation. You are limited to 1 brain. You're also limited to 6 motors. So you cannot build a robot that has 7 motors. You're limited as a constraint to 6. You also have a constraint that you can only use 1 battery, a VEX IQ battery. You also are limited to the fact that you cannot modify parts. So this means that you cannot, shave down a gear or add additional rubber to your wheels or whatever. You may not modify any parts. The only thing you can do is you can cut the VEX metal shafts. They do get sold in 12-inch lengths that you can cut. Now, coaches, if you cut this with a hacksaw, you need to make sure that the edges are filed down with a metal file. This is something that, and it talks about it in blue here, there must not be any sharp edges. So adults must actually help with this and cut and round off the edges. And that's it. The rest is about the tournament and how you'll play. We'll go over that closer to when people actually play in a tournament. But basically, you have gone over the game overview, what the game elements are that you're using. You described them. You talked about how to score, and then you listed your criteria and constraints. All of that is how you define the problem. All right, good luck.